False news has become all too common on social media. Unfortunately, some members of the media push their own agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Hey there, folks. You know what? I'm here to talk about this whole Trump wanting to dissolve the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education. Let's start by going over what he has to say, all right?
The United States spends more money on education than any other country in the world, and yet we get the worst outcomes. We're at the bottom of every list.
Okay. I'll admit, and I think we all understand that, the United States most definitely is not high on the list when it comes to education. Of course, we understand that Japan does lead, and Japan spends approximately half of what we spend in terms of the GDP that is allocated for education. So we spend twice as much as they do. They're at the top of the list, and they spend half of what we do, and we are actually closer to the number 13 in terms of where we land in the world. We are not in a good place at all. I will admit that. But, the fact of the matter is that we do spend a lot of money and we don't seem to be getting much of a return.
Total American society pours more than $1 trillion a year into public education systems. But instead of being at the top of the list, we are literally right smack, guess what? At the bottom. Rather than indoctrinating young people with inappropriate racial, sexual, and political material, which is what we're doing now, our schools must be totally refocused to prepare our children to succeed in the world of work and in life and the world of keeping our country strong, so they can grow up to be happy, prosperous, and independent citizens. We owe our children great schools that lead to great jobs and leads to an even greater country that we're living in right now. Right now, we're living in a failing nation because of Joe Biden and these people running it. They're Marxists, they're communists. What they're doing to our country is incredible, but we'll take care of that for our children. Here are 10 key ideas that will power our movement for.
By the way, I've mentioned it before where, Trump does read off a teleprompter, but you know exactly when he's off script. And again, I think that he's just speaking from the heart. It's not something that is obviously scripted. He just rattles these things off from the heart as to what his plan is and what his thoughts are of the current situation.
Great schools. First, we will respect the right of parents to control the education of their children. Second, we will empower parents and local school board to hire and reward great principals and teachers, and also to fire the poor ones, the one whose performance is unsatisfactory. They will be fired.
Okay, you know what? The unions might have something to say about that. Boy. And keep in mind that federal funding accounts for approximately 30% in the state of New York and the state of California. So I'm going to guess that that is somewhat similar across the board in the other states. So the state provides the funding for the education Department of Education at the state level through state taxes and funding. Again, 30% is federal funding. Let's see what else he has to say.
Like on The Apprentice, you're fired. Third, we will ensure our classrooms are focused not on political indoctrination, but on teaching the knowledge and skills needed to succeed. Reading, writing, math, science, arithmetic, and other truly useful subjects. Fourth, we will teach students to love their country, not to hate their country like they're taught right now. Fifth, we will support bringing back prayer to our schools.
Wow. I can't believe he said that. So are we going to be doing the Pledge of Allegiance again? That is pretty interesting. I'd like to see where the heck this leads.
Sixth, we will achieve schools that are safe, secure, and drug-free, with immediate expulsion for any student who harms a teacher or another student. Seventh, we will give all parents the right to choose another school for their children if they want. It's called school choice. Eighth, we will ensure students have access to project-based learning experiences inside the classroom to help train them for meaningful work outside the classroom. Ninth, we will strive to give all students access to internships and work experiences that can set them on a path to their first job. They're going to be very, very successful. I want them to be more successful than Trump. Let them go out.
That's cute. But internship, my question would be, I'm going to guess that it's going to be a free internship. In today's day and age, depending on what you're doing, internships can pay pretty well. But at the same time, with the cost of living being what it is, working for free looks great on a resume, but does not pay the bills, unfortunately.
And be more successful. I will be the happiest person in the world, but we want our children to have a great life and be successful. And 10th, we will ensure that all schools provide excellent jobs and career counseling so that high school and college students can get a head start on jobs and careers best suited to their God-given talents. This is how we will ensure a great education for every American child. And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children because they'll do a much better job of it. You can't do worse. We spend more money per pupil by 3 times than any other nation, and yet we're absolutely at the bottom. We're one of the worst. So you can't do worse. We're going to end education coming out of Washington, D.C. We're going to close it up, all those buildings all over the place, and you have people that in many cases hate our children. We're going to send it all back to the states. Thank you very much.
Reminds me of Afuera, Afuera, Afuera. The president of Argentina, who had been voted in and had just eliminated half of the departments within the government. So Trump might just be learning from him.
Very much. United States.
Oopsie. Yes, that was quite amazing there. I get it as to the fact that eliminating a department helps save in terms of the budget. But what does it mean closing the Department of Education? Because a good amount of the funding that goes to the Department of Education, the DOE, actually supposedly fulfills grants, and and that's approximately at minimum 30% of the budget. And I end up getting mixed numbers as to what the budget is. And it ranged from 260 billion to 88.3 billion. So my question then is, of this 88.3, I understand that the states depend on approximately 30% of their annual budget to be able to sustain. Actually, annual budget to be provided by the at the federal level. So, again, 30%, let's say across the board, because California and New York are there approximately at 30%. So, closing the federal funding, does that mean that that this 30% is also going to get cut? I will tell you what, one thing is that teachers don't get paid enough is one thing. If they don't get the funding federally, what's going to happen to their salaries, because it's already thin enough as it is? We want to be able to pay our teachers well, to be able to have them take care of our children and educate our children. And now I think we're going to be asking for more, ideally, while increasing their income, their salaries to be able to take care of and educate our children. Because, again, there are Pell Grants, there are Title Grants, Title I grants, and of course, funding goes to special needs programs and things of that nature. But what I don't understand is, again, the overall budget's supposed to be approximately $88.3 billion, and roughly around 30% goes to Pell Grants alone. So let's be nice and round it up to 50% of the overall budget is just given away. I don't get it, because unfortunately, the Department of Education does not release how much is actually paid to the administration, what the administration's budget is. So we really have no clue as to how much is being spent where. That's what's scary about this. And maybe Trump understands that better than I can with the limited amount of information that I find. But please, if you have any other information as to the budgetary situations, or at least how much they're getting paid currently, the budgets for administration is one that I'm very curious about. Because is that what Trump is going to go after? Let's say 40 billion, which sounds small. It is a big number, 40 billion, especially if it goes on for 4 years. 16 billion. That's a substantial amount of money. As long as these grants actually go to the people who they are intended to go to, I'd much rather not have these touched. But again, we're putting the bureaucrats in charge of a substantial amount of money. And are these funds going and reaching out to the people that they're intended for? I don't know. And that's what I question, and I truly do hope. And I hope that if there's anybody out there that understands or has a better understanding as to what and where the funding goes to, I'd greatly appreciate it. Please help me out here, right? Because I do support and I love Trump, but this is a pretty deep hole here. And I'd like to be able to report as to the fact that the fat is being trimmed, but it's not hurting the students. So, again, thank you, and shoots.